It's like I've had enough of you. Oh, it's time for our Jewish journey through the Gospel of John. We had a lovely excursion the last couple of weeks, but now we're back into the text, and we are going to press through, beginning with chapter 18 today, what is known as the Passion of the Christ, the betrayal, the trial, the death, the resurrection of our Messiah. All begins right here in chapter 18. But let's make sure we remember where we've been. What was the last thing we saw previously on the Jewish journey through the Gospel of John? Was Yeshua's prayer, chapter 17, you remember? He prayed three ways: for himself, he prayed for the apostles, and he prayed for future believers. That would be, includes us. That was lovely. We leave the words of Yeshua in these verses here. We see the themes and the concern, the passion that Yeshua had for those who would become believers through the ministry of the apostles, again, which 2,000 years later, we would be in that latest generation. I in them, and you in me, that they may be perfected in unity. It's been a long time since anyone can accuse the church of being perfected in unity. But that's not unity in doctrine or unity in how we go about our practice of the kind of songs we sing or the color carpets we have, or whether we have a more liturgical service, a less liturgical, if we include Hebrew, if we include Latin. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about disparate groups of people. Specifically, first century, talking in the first century, we're talking about Jews and Gentiles, two people at enmity with one another. We're talking about men and women. We're talking about socioeconomic differences, those who are in higher financial circumstances, those who are in lower circumstances. And again, you have a wide spectrum of people from various different backgrounds. And it's very, very important when we're looking for the kind of unity that the Bible speaks of that's defined by what the church is. That there's no one in the church saying, this is my truth and you have no idea, you can't speak to it because you've never walked a mile in my shoes. You've never lived my experience. The whole point of the church is that no matter our backgrounds, no matter our geographic origins, no matter whether we're male or female, low or high-born, successful, unsuccessful, we all share the same experience. And that's the experience of being sinners who have been forgiven. Someone said it beautifully the other day, not a skin problem we have, it's a sin problem. But the good news is that we have the solution. That is the good news. Whatever ails our culture, whatever ails our society, whatever ails our world, Yeshua is the answer. Okay? He hasn't left us bereft without a solution. He prays for such a time as this, when socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds and racial issues, gender issues, sex issues may rend us apart. Political spectrum differences may rend the church apart. No. Yeshua's already prayed. He started praying 2,000 years ago that we may be perfected in unity. Doesn't mean we're ever going to achieve that, but it means that that's his concern for us. And if it was his concern for us back in the Gospel of John, I dare say it should be our passionate concern today, that we may, as a church, as a congregation of believers in Yeshua, whatever our backgrounds, whatever our identities, that we may love one another as he has loved us, and thus know unity. So that the world may know that that's a symbol of our, or a consequence of our unity, is that the world will take note and say, oh, look at them. That's different. Look at all the diversity there. And yet they all seem not only to tolerate one another, but they love one another sacrificially. So that the world, this is again, like we saw this morning, the Egyptian street. This is the world street. May know that you sent me and loved them, even as you have loved me. And he ends this way, the prayer, O righteous Father, that the world has not known you. It should not surprise you. Again, it should never surprise you when the world acts like a group of people who are bereft of the knowledge of the creator of the universe, bereft of biblical truth, revelation, and God's holy moral standards, because that's the world. The default position is darkness. So the world loves the darkness. All kinds of things can happen in the darkness under cover of night. The world has not known you. Strong contrast, yet I have known you. And these have known that you sent me. Believers, my apostles, know my origins. They don't know everything they're going to know. Holy Spirit will come, but they know the most important part. Who you are, who I am, and who they are. And I have made your name, your character, your identity known to them, and will make it known, so that the love with which you love me may be in them, and I in them. Yeshua is in us. So if Yeshua is in us through the Holy Spirit, we are communing with him. In fact, today is communion. So today is a great day to think about the communion that we have, I and you and me, between God and his Son, Father and his Son, between us and the Lord, and us and one another through our mutual friend, our mutual Savior, our mutual Messiah, Yeshua. Well, that's Yeshua's prayer. That's how the prayer ends. Very next verse. Very next verse, we pick it up. But before we do that, I want to introduce and set the scene. John does not give us the famous betrayal kiss between Judas and Yeshua. He omits that. So I thought, to set the scene, we will have the second most famous kiss associated with betrayal from this film. Here we go. Take the power of that scene where brothers betrayed the family and multiply that exponentially, where a disciple of Yeshua betrays the Son of God with a kiss. That's just a little touch, right? That's the difference between the kind of spicy Mexican food that we enjoyed in New Jersey growing up and the real spicy of the food that we have down here, right? It's just a little preparation, but the magnitude is exponentially larger. Let's get into the text. When Jesus had spoken these words, that's the upper room discourse, and prayed for his disciples, etc., he went forth with his disciples over the ravine of the Kidron. That's the Kidron Valley. I'll show you a picture in a minute. Where there was a garden, really more like an orchard. It's not like a garden, like, I beg your pardon, never promised you a rose garden. These have trees. It's an orchard in which he entered with his disciples. This is the Kidron Valley, runs down the center of this photo. To your left, of course, is the old city of Jerusalem. To the right is the Mount of Olives and that ravine that runs between them, the Kidron Valley. Let's get in closer. It's a picture that was taken over 100 years ago, before the present Church of All Nations was built. But you can still see the Pilgrim Road descending down the Mount of Olives, and you see this area right here to the right, and that is where the Church of All Nations is today. It's the Garden of Gethsemane. It extends across the way to that private pavilion for those of you who were with me on our last tour, it was in this area to the left, that private pavilion that among the olive tree orchard, that we had a time of prayer, reflection, and teaching. You may remember that. This is what it looks like today, and you may remember being here. Well, place yourself now 2,000 years ago, and this is the setting of what we're about to see. Night, of course, not daylight. This is post-Passover Seder, and we pick up the narrative. We learned that it's called Gethsemane, by the way, not in John. Gethsemane, the place of olive pressing, came to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here until I prayed. Mark, Matthew, Luke, they tell us what the name of the place is. John's not interested in telling you the name of the place. You already know this. See, the thing about John is because it's written after the other Gospels have been written, whether John is familiar with all three of the Gospels or one or two of the Gospels, he knows which stories have circulated, and he's filling in the gaps with his Gospel of what Matthew, Mark, Luke have left out in the synoptics. He's giving you a different flavor. Again, it's a personal reflection. When somebody tells their story, they tell it their way, not the way that somebody, Mark wrote first, okay, so I'm locked in to how Mark tells the story. No, John's his own man. He's his own apostle. Verse 2. Now, Judas also, who was betraying him, you remember the confrontation last we saw Judas was in chapter 13, where Jesus confronts him, says, do quickly what you got to do. He knew the place, for Yeshua had often met there with his disciples. Now, we didn't hear this in John. We didn't know this, but John tells us here. The other Gospels tell us this. Luke, for example, in chapter 21:31, says, now during the day he was teaching in the temple, Yeshua, but at evening he would go out and spend the night on the mount that is called Olivet. So we know from the other Gospels that Yeshua had a habit of going to the Mount of Olives and teaching in the evening with his disciples. So Judas knew precisely where to find Yeshua. Yeshua, at this point in Jerusalem, a creature of habit. Judas then, having received the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So while Yeshua has been sharing a Passover Seder with his disciples, going through the upper room discourse, praying for his disciples, Judas has been a busy guy. He forced into betraying him on Passover because Jesus knew, hey, buddy, the jig is up. Judas had to run to the chief priests, interrupt their celebration. The chief priests sent Judas to Pilate. Pilate set him up with a Roman cohort. Now, let's hang on. Roman cohort, I was like 600 soldiers. Please don't assume that Judas is guiding a group of 600 soldiers to pick up Jesus. Doesn't need to. A piece of the cohort. Doesn't need, whether 2, 10, 20, 100, I don't know. But let's not jump to conclusions. When a fire is put out in your home, God forbid, and you say, yeah, the whole fire department had to come out and put it out, it doesn't really mean that everybody on the payroll of the fire department came out and helped your home. It means that you had a representative sample. So you have a representative sample of the Roman cohort, and John is the only one who actually mentions that there are Roman soldiers involved in this as well, and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees. The chief priests and the Pharisees, that's the way that John speaks of the Sanhedrin, the leadership, the judicial leadership of the Jewish people. So you have a Roman cohort and you have officers from the Sanhedrin. So you have Gentiles, you have Jews. They came with lanterns and torches and weapons. Now, Passover, you remember, that's a full moon. So you had a certain amount of visibility under the full moon, but they're not taking any chances. They want to make sure that they're going to be going through this ravine, they're going to be going through this valley, that they're going to find this, and tiptoeing through the olive trees. that they're going to make sure they find this guy that Judas is leading them to. So what we have, basically, is overwhelming force. To arrest one guy, yeah, but see, it's Passover, and Yeshua is incredibly popular, as we have seen. He is beloved, he's popular, he's controversial, and the government at the time wants to make sure that if they go and do something controversial, that it's not going to result in a mob violent riot. And so instead of sending Judas by himself or traipsing with just a few, they make sure there are Roman soldiers, there are Jewish police, right? That's what the temple police are, the Sanhedrin police. They make sure there is a show of overwhelming force so that when tensions are heightened during an emotional period of time like Passover, when the tensions and the conflict between Rome and the Jewish aspirations for freedom are at their highest, government is doing its job here. Pilate, Sanhedrin, no fools. They send a show of overwhelming force to make sure that no riot is going to break out. Doing what government is paid to do. And so with the Roman cohort, with the Jewish police, you have who's coming to arrest Jesus, who's coming against Jesus, who's responsible for taking Jesus away to be executed. The Romans are, and the Jews are. Jews and Gentiles, the whole world, in other words, bears responsibility for the arrest, for the trial, for the execution of Jesus. John is making it very clear. And for a gospel that gets this rap of being an anti-Semitic gospel and, oh, the Jews are responsible for nonsense. It's very clear here. There's Roman responsibility, Jewish responsibility. Who's got more? Come on, right? Everyone bears responsibility here. The world, right? Again, the default position of the world is darkness. Now, speaking of these Jewish cops, the temple cops, we've actually seen them before. It's been many months. It's been since October that we've seen them back in chapter 7. But you'll remember just this, Yeshua has revealed himself as, hey, you want the Holy Spirit, you want the living water, the Ruach HaKodesh, you got to come to me. Well, the Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about him, and the chief priests and the Pharisees, that's the Sanhedrin, Jewish leadership, that's how John speaks of them, sent officers, cops, temple police, to seize him. Several verses later, verse 44 through 44. Some of them wanted to seize him, but no one laid hands on him. The officers, the police, then came to the chief priests and the Pharisees. They came back to their bosses, the politicians, and they said to them, to the cops, why didn't you bring him? And the officers answered, never has a man spoken a way this man speaks. The Pharisees then answered them, you've not also been led astray, have you? Are you on this team now? So we've seen the police. And the police, even though they were charged with arresting him, they're intimidated by Yeshua. They're impressed, they're awed, maybe afraid, maybe attracted, but nonetheless, so much so that they said, well, you're out of luck because we never heard anybody like this, and so we got the kid gloves for this Yeshua guy, this Yeshua cat. So Yeshua, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, we've seen this a lot. We've seen Yeshua, he knows what's happening, he knows what's going on, right? He's made a list, he's checking it twice, he knows if you've been sleeping, he knows if you're awake. Yeshua in John is in control. Yeshua, knowing all the things that are coming upon him, he's seeing how it plays out. He knows how it's going to play out. He went forth. He stepped forward. And he said to them, whom do you seek? Who are you looking for? See, you got all these torches and lanterns, and weapons. May think you're going on a manhunt, huh? Who are you looking for? Whom do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. And he said to them, this translation says, I am he. Greek simply says, Ego imi. I am. We've seen this before. We've seen, of course, I am with predicate. That's John's famous thing, right? I am the door, I am the way, I am the resurrection and the life, right? But we also have seen Yeshua use the term ego imi, I am, or anihu, in Hebrew, as a way of indicating that before Abraham was, I am, covenant name of God, chapter 8. And that being such a big deal that the Jewish leadership wanted to stone him. Were freaked out. So, who do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth. He said to them, I am. And Judas also, John wants to make sure you understand. Judas also, who was betraying him. How many times are you going to mention, John, that Judas is betraying him? I think we got the connection. Judas is the betrayer. But he wants to make sure, for emphasis, you know who Judas is. He was standing with them. Judas was backed up by the Roman soldiers, the cohort, by the temple police. What happens? So when he said to them, Ego imi, I am, they, who's they? Roman cohort, Jewish cops, and Judas, who was betraying, in case you didn't catch it before. They drew back and fell to the ground. None of the other Gospels mention this as a unique contribution to John. I don't think he made it up out of his head. I think it's true. So you got a couple of ways that you can go with this. They drew back because they expected to be the hunter and looking for prey who would be hiding. And he forthrightly says, oh, you're looking for Jesus? That's me. Comes forward, and they get a little freaked out. And they go backwards, and they topple like dominoes. I mean, it's like the Keystone. So are they the Keystone cops? Are they stumbling over one another as they fall to the ground? Or at the moment that Yeshua said, I am, did a small, infinitesimal glimmer of his eternal essence poke through, shine through for just a moment, that knocked them backwards. They fell to the ground. They drew back. Why did they draw back? They drew back in fear, in awe. And why did these tough guys, there's nobody tougher than soldiers and cops, but they fell to the ground before Yeshua. And I can assure you that this was no trendy response to a counterfeit religion, okay, like we see today. Let me do this and show my virtue signal. Dig me, I can take a knee. That's not what's going on here. What we're seeing is no virtue signaling, but a signal nonetheless. A signal of glory, a messianic signal that sends the toughest men, and even one who is betraying him, sends them backwards, reeling, and knocks them to the ground before him. A genuine religious response to a true object who is worthy of worship, the Son of God. And when he said to them, I am he, they drew back, fell to the ground. Therefore, so they're on the ground. Maybe they start picking themselves up again. Therefore, he again asked them, who are you looking for again? Whom do you seek? It's a beautiful moment in the Gospels here. It shows you who's in control. And they have to repeat themselves. Jesus, the Nazarene. So in this passage thus far, who is proactive? Who is reactive? Who is in control? The ones you think are going to be proactive, the cops, the soldiers, they're not Jesus is proactive. God is proactive. They are reactive. And Yeshua in this arrest scene is very much in control. Jesus answered, I told you I am he. Shall I repeat it again the same way that I said before? Oh, no, you had enough. Okay, good. So if you seek me, let these go their way. You're looking for me, and you're looking for me only, right? You said it twice. So you can have me, but the deal for having me is let these guys go, my disciples. Let these go their way. To fulfill the word which he spoke, of these whom you have given me, I lost not one. When did he say this? Well, back in John 17:12, the prayer. While I was with them, I was keeping them in your name, which you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them perished. But the son of perdition, Judas. And even going back to John 6, this concept, now that John 17 was dealing with, I've kept them safe, physically safe. But going back to John 6, it's talking about not only physically safe, but if they can physically be entrusted with me, certainly their eternal security can be established through me. This is the will of him who sent me, John 6:39, that of all that he has given me, I lose nothing, but raise it up on the last day. This is a concept. If Yeshua can keep you now, he can keep you in the future. Very much important point. But Simon Peter, man of action, right? With action, you get traction. Okay. Then having a sword, of course he did. Really, a dagger is the term. Okay, it's a dagger, not a sword like Zorro. Okay, has a dagger in his robe. Simon Peter, having a dagger, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. It's a piece of his right ear, small little piece of the right ear, it says. And the slave's name, by the way, was Malchus. So, first of all, interesting, Simon Peter completely missing what Yeshua is doing, okay? I'm giving myself up so you can get to safety, right? No, I know better, right? I'll give my life for you, Lord. Simon Peter, because we always know better than God, right? Having a sword, drew it, struck the high priest, slave. Whoa, wait a second. You're telling me that the high priest had a slave? Are you telling me that there's slavery in the Bible? I think that perhaps because there's slavery in the Bible, maybe we need to cancel the Bible. What do you think? Shall we cancel the Bible? Because we can't think about a world where actual historical events might have occurred, right? Like even the chief priest, the high priest, had a bondservant. That's a slave. Slavery existed. But this is the slave, the number one guy. Everybody knows this guy, high priest, the high priest slave. This Malchus, famous, maybe infamous guy. Now, Peter taking his knife. I don't know what he was aiming for. He's used to filleting fish, right? If he's using his little dagger, what's he using it for? Cutting the heads off fish. If you cut off a guy's ear, don't tell me that Peter was aiming for his ear. What was he aiming for? He was aiming for his head. Well, Peter demonstrated he's a better fisherman than he is a warrior, but nonetheless, intentions, right? Intentions. So Jesus said to Peter, put the sword in the sheath, put it away. And where other gospels would say things like, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword, right? Puts the focus on Peter. John puts the focus right back on Yeshua here. Put it away. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? The other gospels, they tell how Yeshua prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane 3 times. Lord, take this cup away. If it's possible, take this cup away, right? Saying, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove the cup from me. Yet not what I will, but you will. This is John's way of incorporating that point. And again, being proactive here, the cup which the Father has given. So take this cup away, that the other Gospels speak of. How do you get this cup? John is very specific. The Father gave that cup of suffering to the Son. You gave me this cup. Shall I not drink it? In a way, I guess it's true that for all of us who follow Yeshua, we all are to take up our cross daily and follow him. So it could be argued, if I were getting to preaching, that the Father has given all of us a particular cup, particular burden to bear, particular responsibility that most likely requires an intensity of suffering and pain and sacrifice for the sake of his name. So right now, I just want to think before we take communion, I want you to ask yourself, has the Father given you a particular cup? You may not have ever thought about this, but now I want to think about it. If the Father given you a cup, what is the cup that the Father, we know what the cup was for Yeshua. Crucifixion, right? A humiliating beating and trial before that, but crucifixion, horrible death, naked. That was his cup to drink for a larger purpose, to serve the Father's will. What is the purpose of the cup that the Father has given you? If the Father has given you a cup, shall you not drink it? Shall we not be like our master, Yeshua? Are we greater than our master? Is the servant, is the slave greater than the master? Yeah, see, that's the other thing about the slavery concept. The Bible is through and through with it. It's filled with it. We're all slaves if we follow Yeshua, right? Before that, we were all slaves. Slaves to sin. Slaves to Satan. We all march in lockstep with the rhythm of the world and of the flesh and of the devil. We thought we were calling our own tune, but we never were. It's like all the art students that I went to school with when I was in college, right? And they're all like striking out a blow for individuality, right? Hey, look at how out there I am. Look at how individual I am. Look at how shocking I can be. And they all had variations on pink hair and wearing black clothes, right? You look like you're wearing a friggin' uniform. You're so individual, right? Well, what a bunch of rebels, right? But even though they thought they were calling their own tune as art students and cool whatever, goth, whatever term wasn't in favor when I was in school. But nonetheless, they all wound up dancing to the same tune. And now with social media and with our culture, 24-hour news, if we don't have Yeshua, and if we don't keep Yeshua front and center in our lives, if we don't keep the cup that the Father has given us to drink in other words, what's your purpose in life, right? Do I need to spell it out? What's your special purpose? What's your destiny? What's the purpose for which God created you? If we don't keep that at the forefront and obedience to him, very easy to get distracted, right? It's like when my kids got his music up too loud, and even though I'm trying to listen to my music, that beat is so incessant that it's interfering with the music that I'm listening to, and I can't help but be influenced by. That's the world. Cup the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? Now, the good news for old Malchus, the chief important slave of the high priest, is that Yeshua fixed Peter's problem. The aim. Again, if we got a short sword like that, you're going to crack some heads. That's what you're looking for, right? So he went to cleave a head in twain, and it's a good thing he went for the slave and not the soldier, right? Because it could have been a different story for old Peter. But he went for the easy mark, and missed with that. One of them struck the slave of the high priest. That's Peter. John's the only one who tells us Peter, and cuts off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, knock it off, no more of this. And he touched Malchus's ear and healed him. So we get Peter and John, and we get the name, Malchus, because it's important. So the Roman cohort, and commander, and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And what's going to happen to Jesus? I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you in suspense. It's time for... You're telling me you're going to stop in the middle of a sentence? You're going to stop with a comma? I am. I must leave you in suspense.